Welcome to Sleepscape. If you enjoy bizarre mysteries, unsettling true stories, and the unexplained, please consider subscribing. I release new videos every Sunday. Before we get started, I'm curious. What's your favorite horror movie? Let me know in the comments. I always enjoy seeing everyone's picks. Now, let's get into it. I was afraid for my life. I also was very afraid for my family. I had visions of coming home from work and seeing my family destroyed, brutally murdered, or just laying there dead. Those were the words spoken by Alan Tallman years after leaving what he believed had become one of the most terrifying homes in Wisconsin. Alan wasn't describing life in a dangerous neighborhood. He wasn't talking about violent crime. And he wasn't the kind of person who spent his life chasing stories about ghosts or the paranormal. Instead, he was an ordinary husband, a father of 3, who claimed that everything changed after bringing a second-hand bunk bed into his family's new home. The events surrounding what would later become known as the Horicon House Haunting took place in the quiet farming community of Horicon, Wisconsin. Located roughly 50 miles northwest of Milwaukee, Horicon was a place where families expected peaceful neighborhoods, good schools, and ordinary lives. In April of 1986, Alan and Debbie Tallman moved into a newly constructed home on South Larrabee Street with their 3 young children. According to the family, the house represented everything they had worked toward. It was their dream home. There were no stories of previous owners. No reports of unexplained activity. Nothing to suggest the house was anything other than an ordinary suburban home. For nearly a year, life inside the Tallman household appeared completely normal. Then, in early 1987, the family purchased a second-hand wooden bunk bed. According to the Tallmans, what followed over the next 9 months would permanently change their lives. Their story would eventually gain national attention after being featured on Unsolved Mysteries in 1988. Decades later, it remains one of the most discussed alleged hauntings in Wisconsin history. Tonight, we're taking a closer look at the case known as the Horicon House. On April 13, 1986, Alan and Debbie Tallman moved into their new home on South Larrabee Street in Horicon, Wisconsin. For the Tallman family, the house represented a fresh start. According to Alan, it was everything they had hoped for: a newly built home, a quiet neighborhood, and enough room to raise their 3 young children. In later interviews, both Alan and Debbie described the house as their dream home. Nothing about the property seemed unusual. There were no rumors surrounding the house, no reports of paranormal activity, no unsettling stories shared by neighbors. For nearly a year, life inside the Tallman home was exactly what they had imagined. The children played throughout the house. Alan spent long hours at work as a shift supervisor at a local manufacturing plant. Debbie cared for the children while settling into their new routines. But within weeks of moving in, something unexpected happened. According to Debbie, all 3 children began getting sick. One after another, they developed illnesses serious enough to require repeated trips to the doctor's office. The family couldn't explain why. At the time, however, they didn't associate the illnesses with anything supernatural. Young children often become sick. New homes expose families to unfamiliar environments. Life simply goes on. Months passed. Then, in early 1987, Alan came across a used wooden bunk bed for sale. The Tallmans needed additional sleeping space for the children, and buying secondhand furniture made financial sense. There was nothing unusual about the bunk bed. It wasn't advertised as an antique. It wasn't connected to any local legend. It wasn't purchased from an abandoned house or an estate sale surrounded by strange rumors. It was simply a practical purchase made by a young family furnishing their home. After bringing the bed home, Alan assembled it and temporarily stored it in the basement while preparations were made upstairs. According to the Tallmans, that ordinary piece of furniture would soon become the center of everything that followed. According to the Tallman family, the first unmistakable signs that something was wrong began only after the bunk beds were moved upstairs. At first, the incident seemed almost too small to take seriously. One evening, Alan and Debbie's son Danny was asleep in the bedroom next to the bunk beds when he suddenly ran from his room in a panic. According to his parents, Danny insisted his clock radio had begun changing stations by itself. Unlike modern digital radios, the unit used a manual tuning dial. Danny claimed he watched the indicator move from one side of the radio to the other without anyone touching it. Alan and Debbie weren't convinced. Like most parents, they searched for an ordinary explanation. Perhaps the radio was malfunctioning. Perhaps Danny had imagined what he saw. To avoid any further arguments, they simply removed the radio from his room. At the time, neither of them believed anything paranormal was taking place. A short time later, Alan experienced something that was much harder to dismiss. While painting in the basement, he stopped for dinner, leaving his paintbrush resting inside a bucket of paint. When he returned, the brush was no longer lying where he had left it. According to Alan, it was standing upright inside the bucket, balanced on its bristles. He stared at it in disbelief. The sight made no sense. Still, he resisted the conclusion that something supernatural was happening. He later admitted that, even then, he refused to believe his house could be haunted. But the most disturbing reports were yet to come. According to Debbie, their youngest daughter soon began waking during the night, frightened by something she claimed was standing inside her bedroom. The little girl described seeing what she believed was a witch near the door. She repeatedly spoke about fire surrounding the figure. Alan and Debbie assumed she was having nightmares. Children often imagine monsters in dark bedrooms. There was no reason to think otherwise. Then, about a month later, their son Danny described seeing something remarkably similar. According to Debbie, no one ever told Danny what his younger sister had been saying. Yet he claimed he had seen an old woman standing near his bedroom door. Like his sister, he said the figure appeared to glow with fire. For Alan and Debbie, that was the moment everything changed. The strange incidents could still be dismissed individually. The radio, the paintbrush, the children's nightmares. But taken together, they no longer felt like isolated events. For the first time, Alan began wondering if the impossible was happening inside his own home. As the weeks passed, according to the Tallman family, the unexplained incidents became more frequent. The children no longer wanted to sleep alone. Simple bedtime routines that had once lasted only a few minutes now stretched late into the night. Alan and Debbie found themselves constantly reassuring their children that everything would be alright. But privately, they were becoming less certain of that themselves. According to the family, strange noises echoed through the house after dark. Doors were occasionally heard opening and closing on their own. Voices seemed to call from empty rooms. Even when nothing unusual happened, the atmosphere inside the house had changed. The Tallmans later described living in a constant state of anticipation, always waiting for the next unexplained event. For Alan, the greatest fear wasn't what he believed he had experienced. It was what might happen to his family. Years later, he recalled imagining the worst every time he left for work. He feared returning home to find his wife and children dead, not because anyone had threatened them, but because he had become convinced that whatever was inside the house intended to harm them. As Christmas approached, the strain on the family reached a breaking point. According to Debbie, the children remained terrified by the figures they claimed to see inside the house. Alan felt increasingly helpless. Then, one evening, he finally snapped. According to the family, Alan began shouting into the empty house. He challenged whatever he believed was tormenting them. He later recalled yelling, "Whatever's in our house, would you please leave my children alone? If you want to fight, fight with me." For Alan, it wasn't an act of courage, it was an act of desperation. He could no longer stand watching his children live in fear. Whatever was happening inside the Tallman home, he wanted it directed at him instead. But according to the family, the activity did not stop. If anything, they believed it became even more intense. Desperate for answers, the Tallmans eventually turned to someone they trusted, their family pastor. According to the Tallmans, they asked him to visit the home after months of increasingly disturbing experiences. After speaking with the family and spending time inside the house, the pastor later said he believed the presence they described was not simply psychological. Instead, he concluded that whatever the family believed they were experiencing appeared to be spiritual in nature. In later interviews, he explained that he believed the reported entity belonged to what he described as the occult or demonic realm. The Tallmans hoped the visit would bring peace to their home. According to the family, it did not. If anything, they believed the activity continued to escalate. 3 weeks after Christmas, according to Alan Tallman, he experienced the incident that would haunt him for the rest of his life. On January 7th, 1988, Alan returned home shortly after 2 o'clock in the morning following his shift at work. The neighborhood was quiet. The streets were empty. As he walked toward the house carrying his lunch pail, he heard something unusual. At first, it sounded like the wind. Soft, barely noticeable. Then it grew louder. Alan later described it as a powerful howling sound. But there was one problem. The night itself was calm. Nothing around him was moving. Then, according to Alan, a voice emerged from the sound.
"Come here,"
it said. Believing someone might be outside, Alan walked around the side of the house to investigate. He found no one. As he returned toward the front steps, the sound came again. This time louder than before.
"Come here,"
it said. The voice repeated the words over and over. Alan later said his attention was suddenly drawn toward the garage. There, he claimed, he saw what appeared to be a strange glow. Terrified, he ran inside the house. He locked the front door behind him and stood silently, trying to make sense of what he had just witnessed. Then another thought crossed his mind. Had the garage caught fire? Fearing the worst, Alan rushed back outside. But when he looked toward the garage, everything appeared completely normal. There was no fire, no smoke, nothing. Confused and frightened, he returned inside once more. He locked the door. Then he bent down to pick up his lunch pail. And according to Alan, the moment he reached for it, something hurled through the living room. The lunch pail was knocked away violently, as if something unseen had launched it from his hand. Alan froze. Then panic took over. He ran through the house. When Debbie awoke, she found her husband racing from room to room in obvious terror. She later recalled that he had never seen him behave that way before. The experience profoundly changed him. According to the family, Alan began sleeping on the floor of his daughter's bedroom each night. He no longer wanted them left alone. Then, only a short time later, Alan reported one final encounter. As he lay awake beside his daughter's bed, he noticed what appeared to be a dense fog slowly forming across the floor. According to Alan, a voice emerged from within it. He immediately left the room and found Debbie. When she saw him, she later recalled that his lips had turned blue. His face was pale. Tears streamed down his cheeks. Unable to understand what had happened, Debbie called their pastor in the middle of the night. She didn't tell him they had seen a ghost. She simply said something had happened, and that Alan was crying. For the Tallman family, there was no longer any doubt. Whatever they believed was inside their home, they could no longer face it alone. In the days following Alan's encounter, according to the Tallman family, the atmosphere inside the house became unbearable. Sleep came only in short moments. Every unexpected sound drew attention. Every night ended with the same question: what would happen next? Alan continued sleeping on the floor of his daughter's bedroom, unwilling to leave them alone. According to the family, they no longer felt safe anywhere inside the house. Then, one evening, Alan was scheduled to work late. Concerned about leaving Debbie alone with the children, arrangements were made for a relative to stay at the house until the girls had fallen asleep. Unlike the Tallmans, the relative remained deeply skeptical of everything he had been told. He wasn't convinced the house was haunted. He believed there had to be a reasonable explanation for what the family claimed they were experiencing. According to Debbie, that skepticism didn't last long. Sometime later that evening, the relative reportedly rushed from the children's bedroom in obvious fear. Debbie immediately asked what had happened. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned around and went back into the bedroom to retrieve one of the girls. When he returned, Debbie later recalled saying, "We're leaving this house. I'm never coming back here. I don't care anymore. I've had it. I can't handle this anymore." That night, the Tallman family walked away from the home they had once believed would be their forever house. 2 weeks later, according to Alan and Debbie, the secondhand bunk beds were destroyed. Whether the furniture had any connection to the experiences they reported has never been established. But after everything the family believed they had endured, they wanted the beds gone forever. The Tallmans eventually relocated to another Wisconsin community. According to later interviews, they never again reported experiencing the kinds of disturbances they associated with the house on South Larrabee Street. The dream home they had purchased less than 2 years earlier was left behind. But the questions surrounding what happened there were only beginning. After leaving Horicon, the Tallman family attempted to rebuild their lives. According to Alan and Debbie, the unexplained events they had reported inside the house never followed them to their home. Whatever they believed they had experienced, they believed it had been left behind. Later that year, their story attracted the attention of the television series Unsolved Mysteries. In October of 1988, the case was broadcast to a national audience in a segment titled Tallman's Ghost. Because the family wished to protect their privacy, actors portrayed Alan, Debbie, and their young children during the dramatic recreations. The Tallmans themselves appeared only in interview footage. For millions of viewers, it became one of the program's most memorable paranormal investigations. Unlike stories set inside abandoned mansions or centuries-old estates, this case centered on an ordinary family living in a newly built suburban home. That contrast made the story especially unsettling. Over the years, numerous theories have been proposed. Some believe the family encountered a genuine paranormal presence. Others have suggested psychological stress, misinterpretation, coincidence, or other natural explanations. No single theory has ever accounted for every experience the Tallmans described. Adding another layer to the mystery, later occupants of the home have not publicly reported the same kinds of disturbances described by the family. Whether the reported activity was connected to the house, the bunk beds, or something else entirely, has never been determined. More than 3 decades later, the Horicon House remains one of Wisconsin's most discussed alleged haunting cases. Not because anyone has ever proven what happened there, but because no one has ever been able to fully explain why the Tallman family's lives changed so dramatically after one ordinary purchase. Whether the events reported by the Tallman family were paranormal, psychological, or the result of something that has yet to be understood, only those who lived inside the house truly know how the experience changed them. For Alan Tallman, the greatest fear was never the unexplained voices, the strange apparitions, or the stories surrounding a secondhand bunk bed. It was the possibility that something might harm the people he loved most. Today, the house still stands. To most people, it appears no different than any other home on a quiet Midwestern street. Children still ride bicycles through the neighborhood, neighbors still mow their lawns, life goes on, much as it did before the Tallmans ever arrived. But for one ordinary family, that house became the setting for 9 months they would never forget. And whether the answers lie in the paranormal, the psychological, or somewhere in between, the Horicon House remains one of Wisconsin's most enduring alleged haunting cases. If you enjoyed tonight's story, subscribe to Sleepscape for more true paranormal encounters, unexplained mysteries, and documented cases from around the world. Until next time, sleep well.